Hey guys, this is Brady Winski, and joining me this week is Jack Dellapenna and Jack
Hello.
McMurtrie,
Hey everybody.
and we will be discussing the film Parasite for my midterm LMC 3255 class. So I just wanted to start off with you guys' general impressions of the movie, how you thought about it, or just anything that spoke to you in particular.
Well, Dellapenna, I know you're kind of a film buff yourself. What were your main impressions upon your first watch?
Um, so I usually require a second watching to catch a lot of the details, and a film that's dense with details is that's generally my favorite type of movie. Um, One of my favorite things about it was how right from the start I noticed that there were a lot of interesting motifs that connected pretty intricately with the theme, and I don't know, that just really I thought it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of the things that really stood out to me, like you were saying, like you could just tell it was an artful film. I mean, I know
Very well made.
Scorsese's praised it for that, and other directors I'm sure have also had their praise thrown out just because like everything felt very purposeful. It felt like there wasn't a wasted moment in the entire movie. Like every time, every line a character spoke or every action that they took, like either came back later or was foreshadowing for some further action that was going to be taking place later. So I found that, like you were saying, like after watching that movie, it demanded a rewatch because there was so much stuff that was alluded to early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I like you can just tell it's very well shot. Everything is very purposeful. Like you can just tell the amount of meaning and thought that went into the film. Um, and obviously, like Del Penna said, I really appreciate that. Those are the kind of movies I like. Something that you can break down and have your own interpretation of it, even if it may seem like it has like a already set meaning. Like I think for this film, like that's especially apparent is like there are some things where it's like, oh, that's kind of obviously saying this, but I think there is so much more to it on top of just those obvious meanings.
Yeah, all the nuance definitely allows for different interpretations and multiple interpretations of the same events. There's every character has different motivations and all that.
Yeah.
You really see how every character, even the ones that you're not initially following, have pretty unique and interesting personalities. Like one of my favorite is the daughter of the rich family, Dahai. She So one of the when we meet her for the first time, or one of the first times, she's downstairs just peeking her head outside the stairs, and uh, it's instantly apparent that she's suspicious of her brother and his intentions with his whole art craze, and she's there's a pretty intricate relationship that we see between her and her brother that really isn't brought up at any other point beyond this sequence, but it it gives you characterization for her so that you know that she's a person and that you can look a little more into her than just as the superficial daughter of the rich family.
Yeah, there's a lot of different stuff like that. I think there's not a single character that's wasted in this film. Even like the friend who's only there for the first scene, like his name
Min?
Min.
Min.
Yes,
Yeah.
he gets brought up later a bunch,
Yeah.
but even him from the very beginning, like he is such a strong character that you instantly he's like a foil to the son and everything like
Yeah.
that.
So you brought up like the Dahai kind of hiding behind the wall and like listening in.
Sorry, I got a little diabetes alarm action.
But so like I feel like that kept happening in the movie, like people hiding behind walls, spying on people. Obviously for the basement scene, like they're all hiding in the stairwell, listening to what they're saying. When the Kims are hiding under the table, they're listening in on like the Kim parents like conversation, and I think part of that is they get to see who they really are, and they like their true intentions, and people kind of like hold like, especially between like the classes and stuff, like they really get to see like who they are instead of just like the face that they put on. And I think like that's also seen like when they lay people off, they don't tell them why they're laying them off. And they even say when they fire the driver, they say, I don't want to stoop to his level. And like they see honesty as almost like a lower class kind of thing. Do you guys have anything to say?
Yeah, that sparked so many things that I've been wanting to talk about during this discussion. But I think, firstly, like, just the whole idea of the dramatic irony of seeing other people's conversations and everything like that, like, for you as the viewer, that creates so much tension. And I mean, we were talking about this before we even did the second watch through, like, once they go down into the basement, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, once they see what's down there, like, that is almost an hour and a half from the end of the movie, and it feels like the climax runs the entire time because of so many of those conversations. But to talk to your further point that you made about seeing people the way they actually are, like when the family is drinking in the house, when the rich family's out on their attempted camping trip, I believe the father or mother at one point says, like, not nice, not rich and still nice, but nice because they're rich.
Yes.
And it's that superficial niceness absolutely falls through right after that, about 15 minutes later, when they find themselves under there and the parents are having this like very chauvinistic sex scene while they're screaming, "Buy me drugs," and all this stuff, and all these things that were, like we were saying earlier, like talking about how the dad's like, "Oh yeah, I mean, we'll call it love," and all this stuff. And you see the cracks forming, like. It's not until they actually get to be a fly on the wall or a passive observer that those things come out.
Yeah. And then to build upon like the whole sex scene, it's like the way that they interact with each other, the way that the families interact with each other is so different. And like you say, like you see the cracks forming, and even though the rich family has more money and it seems more comfortable and they have a better life, there's so much less love, there's so much less interaction between them. Like a big thing is, so apparently I read in an article, I believe it was Forbes, that in Korean, family, it means like eating mouths or something like that. So like eating together is like a huge deal.
I was going to talk about that with the Ramadan or whatever.
Yeah, and you always see the Kims eating together, like that's a big thing. Like there's like 4 or 5 scenes of them eating together, and you never see the Parks eating together. And like you said with the Ramadan, she offers the Ramadan to the housekeeper before she offers it to her daughter. Like and that there's a huge fight over just, why didn't you offer me this food?
Yeah, and they even criticize. They go as far as to criticize the housekeeper for bringing all the, like, always making food for everybody and stuff. They're like, yeah, it's kind of her thing. She eats so much, and obviously that's alluding to
the basement. Yes, I love that. Yeah. She eats for 2. Yeah,
that's
because I remember my first watch through that went right over my head.
I did too. Yeah,
and it still stuck out to me though. Later when I was like, oh man, like going back now.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's a lot to it.
Never crossed the line except for that. They don't want to admit that sometimes they're not as, sheen, like they don't have the shiny sheen that they would like to admit that they think they have.
That is something that I actually wanted to hear you guys talk about, because I understand the visual symbolism of cross the line. I mean, that was apparent. The first shot at the window and the last shot of the window when it's snowing, that had clear visible lines. The fridge. I mean, the second watch through we just did, that had been pointed out to me, so I wanted to pay attention to it. But from
did you see the thing on Reddit? I mean, obviously it's in the movie, but it's like when the housekeeper wakes up the mom, she claps across.
That was what first brought
crosses
to my
the line.
attention, actually. Yeah. So that's I figured that was foreshadowing to her that being able to be fired later. But were there any really significant things that you guys that stood out to you on the second watch through, like paying attention to that? Because I know that's a big thing, but I still feel like there's more to it that I'm lacking in understanding.
In terms of like the line,
or
just like when you watch it the second time, things that stood out to you.
Yeah, things that stood out to me, and just like what the main, because that was such a huge dialogue and visual point. Like I feel like there is I still feel like I haven't grasped the whole concept.
Yeah, I agree. Because, like, I saw that Reddit post, and I was like, oh, I need to see the line crossing.
All of them, yeah.
And it's still, even on
It's hard to tell sometimes,
Yes.
though. And I think, so Bong Joon Ho draws a lot from Martin Scorsese. He even thanked him in some of his speeches. And if you ever watch The Departed, there's the X motif throughout, which... whenever a character is near or behind an X, it indicates that they're going to die later in the movie. And in this film, motifs are everywhere. There's the dark light juxtaposition, which happens everywhere.
Especially in the basement.
Most scenes either happen in the bright daytime or
very dark.
Very dark.
I think at the beginning, like the beginning of the film, when they pan down from the window, which we can talk about later, I think... isn't his face is illuminated. I think it's daytime. And then at night, I just realized, right when we watched it, that like you can't even see his face.
Oh yeah, it's like
so
pitch dark, snowy.
Yeah.
But what were you saying, Dellapenna? You were still going on about that.
Yeah.
Comparing it to
there's the stink bugs, the element of smell is throughout.
Yes.
How the Kim family at the very beginning says, "Oh, these damn stink bugs," and they even go so far as to leave their window open when the fumigators walk by, and the steps throughout, going up and down them. Water as a motif when the mother Kim is making Ramdan, the shot focuses on the water that's dripping down the faucet, the water that causes floods in the slums.
It's raining.
Lots of rain throughout the movie.
Okay, you're mentioning a lot of things I want to talk about. So where do you want to start with? Stairs, the stone, is there anything... Okay, I feel like we should start with stairs, because
you guys were occasionally talking about that during the movie. I think I kind of got it, but I want to hear your interpretation.
So even like Bong Joon Ho has said in an interview that this is a movie about stairs. Like he's like, oh, I love stairs. He talked about stairs a lot in multiple interviews, and he's also cited The Housemaid, which was like I guess like a Korean film which used stairs a lot, and then I haven't seen it, but have you guys seen Psycho?
No,
but apparently that also used stairs a lot as a motif, and then like I think there's a lot to the stairs, and it's hard to really get all the meaning of it and tell like when it's just like, oh, they're just walking down the stairs because that's part of the movie, or if it's a significant like a stairs scene kind of thing. But like obviously the rich family stays at the top of the stairs, the housekeeper stays in the middle, and then the basement dwellers or whatever are at the very lowest.
And the Kims live in a semi-basement.
Yeah. And then also...
That's like the most literal interpretation,
yes.
I think.
I think, that's like the surface level. Like it's very obvious to like when you watch. It's like, oh, that's...
Even walking up the hill to get to their house.
Yes.
Everything like that.
Yeah, they live at the top of the hill. And then like especially the scene when they're going back to their house during the flood. The amount of stairs they walk down.
And the people at the bottom are the only ones who have to deal with stuff like the flood. So when you look at, greater themes like... It's kind of a reach for some, but climate change and how the people that are richer won't have to deal with the effects as much.
Not a big reach.
And like they even say like the rich people are like, oh, thank God it rained.
Exactly,
that was so great. And like it's like all these people had lost everything.
Just back on the stairs though, like I really found that a lot of characters changed their actions based on like immediately after and what level they were on. Like certain people like succumb to murder and certain stuff like that at the very bottom of the stairs. Like all of like the worst things I feel like really happened down in the basement. And then also like certain characters would go upstairs and like during the lessons and stuff like that, both the two children would go upstairs, and then when they were teaching the park children, they put on this whole different like character and everything like that, and then they would come home and be having their like wind down, chill dinner time like that.
Yeah, like, and like when she's in the bath, she fits in and stuff.
Exactly.
also acknowledging how characters move up the stairs. Park, the elder Park, when he walks up the stairs, he just does it like a normal person would. But when you watch, what's his name, the husband basement dweller, when he walks he crawls up the stairs the first time, and then when he was walking,
he goes on his hands.
He goes on his hands and knees.
That's a really good point.
And then when he walks or goes up the stairs the second time, he's like, he uses his elbows to brace the walls as he he fervently runs up.
He never looks like he's like we were saying about the bath. He never looks like he was meant there. I mean, that's also just to be visually jarring in the final climax of the scene in the movie. But that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about how they go up the stairs, how comfortable they look.
And at the end when he's running up the stairs and he has the thing around his neck, I guess it's Jun is the basement.
Okay.
But I love the casting of him because he's just a creepy looking dude.
He's
and
good
especially
eyes. His eyes are a focus all the time.
The ghost scene, when I was writing notes for the movie, I just referred to him as the ghost.
Yeah.
Because I think that characterizes him so well.
And they use him sparingly, I would say, and every time it is off-putting.
Yes.
Every time he's featured, you are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's also to indicate the difference between him and the Kims, because they are both poor. Both families are poor, but he's such a different type of person. They're poor because they don't have work. He's poor because loan sharks are after him.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to touch on that as well, but I just want to finish my thought of when he's running up the stairs with the thing on his neck, and he's literally pulling him back down. He's literally stopping him from escalating up the stairs, which is obvious imagery. But I mean, I don't know, it's cool.
No, I mean, I don't know. We could expand on that more.
Yeah,
I see that point. And it's that they're both fighting each other to take the most of it, to get the most crumbs from this rich family who's living in complete peace upstairs on their camping trip or whatever.
And to them, they were here first, and these new people that came in that are trying to do essentially the same thing they're doing, they just can't deal with it.
Yeah, whatever differences they have, they're both scraping by to continue to subsist off of just being a parasite, quote unquote.
So I wanted to mention the title.
Yes.
So obviously there are no real parasites or whatever in the movie, but there's such parasitic relationships, and even Bong Joon Ho had said that the idea for the movie grew inside him like a parasite. And so obviously at the beginning they are parasites off of the Wi-Fi and stuff, and then once they start working, both of the families kind of have a parasitic relationship.
Very codependent.
Yeah, very codependent. And then I think obviously the biggest parasite is the people living in the basement, even to the point where it's if you have a parasite living inside of you, they take some of your food and stuff, and you don't really know that they're there.
I think that's why I always make the argument that they would be the biggest parasite in the basement, is because they're unnoticed. I think that's what makes the most successful parasite throughout the film.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
And that kind of mirrors our society, I think, because a lot of times we talk about how homeless people are they're an unknown to some of the upper class. We talk about how disconnected some rich people are, and the best parasites are those which we don't notice, the ones that just go under the radar. I thought one of the most striking facts I learned recently was that Athens, Georgia has one of the largest homeless populations in the United States, but you don't know that because there's a huge college campus there, and they do their best to not advertise it whenever they have football games or any major events going on. So,
but if you talk to Athens students that live maybe not in the dorms but off campus, I mean one of my friends who goes to Athens says he gives money to the same homeless guy outside of his apartment every day. It's just there's it's such a huge issue that people just pretend isn't there. And
Well,
they
yeah.
And I
drink
think that,
or, whatever.
I think that the biggest thing, like, and this is obviously, I think, going back to like the very beginning of this conversation, this movie could be taken so many different ways. I think, like, in the pure literal sense, I think that the name of the film Parasite, like, the idea is that the first family, the Kims, are there. You think that they're the parasites the whole time, and so it's meant to be a big, like, bait and switch when you find the people in the basement.
Yeah.
But I've heard the argument made, and I think that it's a valid argument, and it's definitely a certain interpretation of the film that the Parks are the true parasites of the film because, for instance, like, they have no way to cook or clean or anything like that. They're kind of not helpful in that regard. I think, I don't recall, but there are certain, I wouldn't say there's a strong argument to be made, but the daughter is not that successful in school without her tutors, and she seems to be just interested in her tutors, and, like, and this is obviously denigrating her, but, like, she's, like, very interested in her tutors in, like, a, like, oh boy kind of way.
Yeah, sexual.
Sexual, like, they make her out to be, like, they make everyone in that family out to be sort of seeking pleasure, avoiding, like, negative things in their lives, and then doing so with the help of the people around them. And so, back to your point about society right now, like, if the biggest parasites, the ones we don't notice, it could be argued that the biggest parasites are the wealthy people taking advantage of lower class people. And I think that's an interpretation that many people will make of this film and have made of this film.
So I kind of want to go back to the Parks' relationship with each other versus the Kims' relationship with each other. I know we've discussed that a little. So I noticed, especially in this last viewing, that Dasong is, like, so integral to the Parks family. And, like, that's really, he's the only significant part of the family that they, like, congregate around. Or, like, that the parents, like, get along with each other. They're only happy when they're interacting with Dasong. And even to the point where Mrs. Park refers to her husband as Dasong's father, not as his name or my husband. And she does it several times.
Well, he was the one who was supposed to have the Ramadan cooked for him initially.
Yeah.
He wanted it because he was satin cold and wet.
Yeah. And I think part of that is it's kind of going over, like, when you're a child, you don't have all of these prejudices and you don't think of people a certain way. Like, obviously, he's the first person that notices the smell, but he doesn't say it's a bad smell. He doesn't reject them. He even goes up to, like, multiple people of the Kims and runs up and smells them and is, like, happy about it. He doesn't have that.
The worst adjective you could use is, like, distrusting. Like, he seems wary of them, but only because he knows there's something up, and they haven't acknowledged it.
Yeah.
He's just curious, and he's a child, which is something that the mother can't realize.
Yeah. And also, it's when Dasong is in the teepee and the Jasing or whatever, the basement guy, the ghost guy, like, he's saying, like, help me, and, like, Dasong is, like, his last hope.
Yeah.
And but Dasong is also kind of the last hope for the Park family to, like, be a real family and love each other. So I think that part of that could be saying, like, children are, like, critical to changing the world and changing how we live. And
well, definitely to that point, I mean, the initial scheme and everything coming out of this was absolutely the two children in the family. Like, they were the ones who came up with all the documents and everything and got them onto this. I mean, they had the mother had the pizza box job, and then that fell through because the father just continued to work and watching that YouTube video trying to do it super quickly.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, that's another point. Do you still have more you want to say about this? Because I did have one other thing that I wanted to bring up too.
I wanted to talk about I want to talk about the when he's watching the video and the fumigating thing. Like, I as soon as I saw that scene, I knew it was going to be like a great movie.
Yeah, he
like,
stared so intently at it while everybody else was doing something so distinctly different.
And I think part of that is to show that like over time poverty breaks you down and that goes along with the whole no plan thing, and that you're just like you're just going to accept the crappy stuff that happens to you because you've been broken down by it so much. But I also feel that it's like that generation, like that the baby boomer generation was kind of taught just take it, like do like
straighten up your upper lip.
Yeah, it's like no matter how terrible it is, just like you just have to like roll with the punches kind of thing. Or
I feel like that's more negative for the baby boomers. I think he, based on his age, is probably more Gen X, and that's like culture-wise grunge, dark clothes, like flannels.
No way, he's definitely older than that.
Yeah, he's pretty old.
Yeah. Him?
Kim?
Or yeah.
The Kim dad?
Yeah.
I think he's baby boomer easily, dude. Dude, his kids are like 20, so...
His kids are older than you.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's baby boomer.
But...
I don't know.
But I think either way, it definitely is to represent someone who has lived in poverty for longer.
Yeah.
Generational wise, like, he is definitely the older generation who has been subject to these conditions for so long. And his kids are the ones who still have the spirit to, like, forge their way into something better. And they do questionable actions because they want to help their family, and they are willing to do that.
And, like, to that point, when... Mr. Kim like finds out that like Ki-woo, like Kevin, has like a plan. He like gets all excited. He's like, "Oh, you have a plan?" Because he realizes that he still has that fight in him. Can be like his salvation. And like I think like a lot of the characteristic or the like the way that they characterize Mr. Kim is like he's so weak, and like he really he failed a bunch of times. Like he has all these issues, and even like when he gets mad and he's like throws stuff off the table and stuff, like his wife isn't even scared of him because she's stronger than him, and like she really like she kills the guy in the basement and stuff, and he is kind of like undervalued throughout the movie.
But I mean, he doesn't really make the basement situation any better. His son definitely is the one who goes out and then, like, actually like when his son comes back to the house during that party, he is there, he talks to the daughter for a little bit, but then immediately goes down to the basement and deals with that. I mean, the dad did stay away from all that as well, even at the same time. But the one thing that I would talk about from the pizza scene and everything is when she says 1 in 4 of these are failures, and then the mom looks back towards the family. I felt like that was directed at the dad.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Oh, no, I saw that on my first watch through. Yeah, so I've been wondering about that, and I've never really figured out which one of... Because, I mean, it was so... Like, the mom looks back, and there's a 2 or 3 second silent shot where all the family's kind of, like, looking around at each other.
But you can even...
I assume it's directed at the father.
It's gotta be.
Yeah, because he's the one who messed up the boxes.
And right after that, when they're standing around... like the woman and trying to like pressure her into like giving them the money and stuff, he's not there.
That's a very good point. So I think that that probably is just more evidence of him being just beat down and not. I mean, he's the one who always gets the most drunk. I feel like whenever they have like a couple beers at the house, I always see he always has like 2 or 3 in front of him. He's always drinking. Like I think he's just living his life. I mean, he's been through the ringer.
Yeah, so. And I love. I know you made a comment on this when we were watching it. Like. Cake. Well, no, when they're mixing the alcohols together, and he's like, "Oh, so classy," and it's like that's not. People don't do that.
Yeah, you don't mix your different whiskeys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was all very interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing, I don't know. This is just some random symbolism. I'm sure there's more important things to talk about, but I noticed right before the door gets trapped right after the housekeeper gets fired and they can't get it out. That night, the family was having, like, Korean barbecue. They were grilling Korean barbecue at their house, and it was the Korean barbecue grill that was stopping the door. And I didn't know if there was any significance there, but it's just another evidence of, like, everything is so purposeful in this movie.
Yeah.
I noticed that this time, because I was watching it like a hawk to see if there was anything I hadn't noticed.
Yeah.
But I was like, that was crazy.
So something we haven't touched on too much, that I think is a huge symbol in the movie is the stone.
Yes.
So I didn't know that much about the stone or like whatever that kind of thing. So I like looked it up, and it's like originally it's like a Chinese kind of tradition, and they have like these like scholars rocks, and the scholars wouldn't go out and into nature and like actually draw something or get their inspiration from actual nature. They would just look at these rocks inside, and that's where they would get their inspiration from. And I think kind of to that effect, like when he returns the rock to nature, I don't really know what that's saying,
in
but
a stream.
yeah. But I thought, that was interesting.
It was nice and full circle.
Yeah. And then what do you guys think about the rock? Obviously, he says it's for financial help or whatever. It's gonna bring material wealth.
Yeah.
The mom is like, food would have been better. Yeah. So what do you guys think about that?
I mean, it almost feels like a genie sort of thing, like monkey's paw kind of. Like, you get your wish, but it comes at a price. That was always what The Rock felt like, especially near the end. Like, this didn't seem as significant until I really was paying attention to it, but like how The Rock is always following him and he can't escape it. Like when he's in the refugee camp after their house floods, he's just asleep with The Rock, and he's like, I can't let go of it.
Yeah.
Then it gets forcefully thrust upon him.
Yeah.
By a person that's trying to kill him with it.
Yeah. So I think part of that, when I first watched it, I saw it as his guilt of like having power and abusing his position, his capitalist position or whatever, like his higher class on someone else, and he has to carry that capitalist guilt with him at all times. And then obviously when he drops the rock, that's what gives him away, and like you said, the basement guy kills him, or like almost kills him with it.
That was an enigma to me, but that's a very satisfying explanation, actually. Like, it's like guilt, and he has to carry it with him throughout the whole movie, and then eventually it's what causes his brain damage and the rest of his life to be that way. I like that explanation. I find that very satisfying. Especially, I'm glad that it did get returned to nature, but it was already too late. Like, that was almost sort of him making peace with his life. Like, I don't need to hold, like, or I don't need to hold on to this guilt also.
Okay, yeah.
Either one. Yeah, I don't need to be rich, or I don't need to hold on to this guilt.
And even when he, because he lets go of the rock, and that's kind of like I don't need this material wealth.
Yeah.
Family is more important to me. And even when he needs the wealth to get the house back, but the whole idea behind the wealth is so he can save his dad. It's all about family at the end.
Yeah, which I think that goes back to Kim versus Park. They're kind of foils one another, but their family in the end, even though they become so shattered, like, stays together. But I mean, one thing that really frustrated me to that regard, it was like, although they did have a tighter family, like a really tight knit family group, like, they when the daughter dies, her ashes are in this huge room with a bunch of other people's ashes with like tiny trinkets, and there's
so like a library.
It's like a library, and there's
somebody
like
vacuuming.
a huge cleaning vacuum machine going off. Like, it's almost like all of those could have been just as tightly knit families, and that's the entire space devoted to all of that familial bonds. Compared to the Park family, their house is probably 5 times as big as that, and they don't eat dinner together.
Yeah.
Somebody drops your ashes on the floor, they're just going to get vacuumed up.
Yeah. 100%. So I think that's just even further, like, it's not necessary. It's sort of a bittersweet ending, definitely, because you get to see the family is still there and they're still coming to their grave, but you gotta wonder, do all the Parks visit their father's grave all the time? Because we never see the Parks after the final murder scene. We never get any conclusion there. I think that's for the best. I don't think there is one answer that could have happened to, or what could have happened to them, but I found that interesting too. It's just the next family that moves in also, the German family, they have a portrait that is identical to the Parks portrait.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just the same, almost American, suburban looking family. They also have 4 kids.
Also, back to The Rock before we move on.
Yeah.
It's what sets the entire plot in motion because the one friend comes to give it to. What's his name? He comes.
Kiwoo or Kevin is like
Yeah.
the son, and then it's Min is a guy.
Yeah, Min comes to give it to Kiwoo, and that's what sets the plot in motion. Is
Still
this
feels
stone?
like the genie to me.
Yeah. I think there's when I was reading about it, there's some term for like that the specific thing you say. Oh, I think it's the MacGuffin. Yeah. So.
Wait, what are you arguing is a MacGuffin? The Rock?
The Rock, yeah.
Okay.
Because it kind of starts.
I guess maybe that's not because a MacGuffin is something that like.
Yeah. You like don't ever know like it's like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. Like,
Sure.
You don't actually know what it is,
Yeah.
but everyone's doing something for it.
So maybe.
Maybe we'll go with maybe.
It has MacGuffin qualities.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. MacGuffin-esque.
So
Pseudo MacGuffin.
in Bong Joon Ho's acceptance speech at the Golden Globes, he says this film is about the rich and poor and about capitalism, and the U.S. is the heart of capitalism. And I think throughout the movie you see like this, like they hold America in such a high regard. Like when Mr. Park is like, oh, is it gonna leak? She's like, oh, I got it from the U.S., so it'll be fine. And then even if you see in the basement, like...
At the house? At the Park's house?
Yeah. Like in the basement at the Park's house, when the ghost guy is like looking at the wall and he sees...
American.
Yes, it's like
Boy
Abraham
Scout
Lincoln
Yes,
and like
all
Boy
this
Scout
memorabilia.
stuff. So even the poor worship this American feeling. And then like when he's trying to sell his sister as like the art teacher or whatever.
Illinois State.
Yeah, Illinois State. And like when he says Illinois,
school.
she's like, oh, Illinois.
She
like,
doesn't even know where it is.
yeah, exactly. She just knows it's in America.
She's like, you'll have to tell me more about this Illinois.
Yeah, and then even when her husband comes in, she's like, oh, we have this new teacher. She's from Illinois.
Yeah.
Like, and like that's like very stressed.
The movie is also entirely in Korean except for the selection of English lines.
Yeah.
Yes, and like you see those like weird, just everyone.
They throw them out there.
Yeah.
And oftentimes repeat things they just had said in Korean just to
Yeah.
almost be like, I could say this in English.
Yeah, just to show that they're like cool or whatever, or like they're American or.
No, I mean really, going back to like what you were just trying to get to, like the heart of that, like what he said, Golden Globe acceptance speech. I think that the whole American ideal, especially like criticisms of capitalism and everything like that, like there's the whole the concept of the temporarily embarrassed millionaire and all that. Like even the poorest people in America have been. It's such a part of the American culture. It's so induced in our society that, well, if you work, you can still be a millionaire one day. Like no one feels like they are a poor person in America. They feel like they are temporarily in a state of being poor, and people don't. It's a lot. There's not as much of a caste system in the U.S. as there is in other countries where. Like in some countries, if you are born into a poor family,
like in India,
it's almost impossible to pull yourself out of that. Because even if you're born into a middle class family, it's so hard to pull yourself out of that there. But I think that part of Bong Joon Ho's like the idea of like his criticism of capitalism with this movie is that ideal is just not a realistic thing. Like in this movie, in order to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, all 4 of them had to commit fraud and do a bunch of very bad things that screwed over other working class citizens.
Yeah.
And so I think that what he was getting at is that when you do this and pull yourself up by this, the rich don't even notice, they're unaffected, they're not very personal with how they interact with their other workers. And then when you, and I think that like it's there's no way to win in this because you have to do things that you know are wrong, and then also other people are disadvantaged and out of a job because of you doing that. And so I think that's sort of the criticism he's going at here. It's not like capitalism is evil, everything like this. It's like it's an unwinnable situation that we've now put ourselves into, and I think that's the main criticism. And I know I've been talking about this for a while, but like after my second watch, that's really kind of what I got.
Yeah, and I think like because capitalism is kind of there's winners and there's losers, and like there has to be losers, but we always focus on the winners. And even like you always see on like Facebook or Twitter, it's like, this man walked 15 miles to work every day, and like, isn't that so great? And it's like, no, like he should have a car or something. Like, and we show these situations, we portray these terrible situations as like heartfelt or like heartwarming or whatever, even though we should see them as like a problem that we want to fix.
I think it's really just trying to bring attention to how ridiculous the situation is, and some of like, it's obviously very hyperbolic in all of the characters' behaviors and everything like that, but I think that it shows the lengths that people are willing to go to save their family and care about their loved ones. And I think that's a thing that's missed a lot in this movie, is that a lot of this movie is about just like love and caring for the people that you care about most. But in doing so, in the situation in the world that they live in, a lot of people get hurt because they do that. And I don't think any of the characters are... That's another thing. Like, I don't see any of the characters necessarily as evil in this film. Like, there's no single character that's just a bad person for the sake of being a bad person. Like,
I would say if any, like, Mr. Park kind of has no redeeming qualities.
Fair, but I don't think he does anything.
He's not necessarily evil.
He doesn't do anything. No character's
like
motivation. Yes, no character's motivations are inherently bad. There's no real antagonist at times.
I agree.
I feel like Park, he's a typical dad. He goes to work. He comes home every day. He makes sure the house is running.
And I think that's to make you think, like, oh, maybe that guy is a passive antagonist because of the situation that our society is. And I think that's what he's getting at.
But I think it can be viewed that way, but especially the whole like crossing the line thing, I think that does paint him as an antagonist in some degree, and that he doesn't want anyone that's poor to cross into his territory.
Absolutely.
And like the whole like smell thing, in like, I don't ride the subway because like it smell, or like the people that ride the subway have a certain smell, and like he's just so scared, and like obviously that smell is poverty, like and he doesn't want these poor people to cross over into his world, cross that line, because he wants to feel secluded from them and on that hill, and they're at the bottom, and he doesn't have to deal with them. Dellapenna, you have anything to say about the capitalism or...
Yeah, Dellapenna, what are your thoughts about capitalism?
Or like America?
Yeah.
I think it's the way their family is structured. One thing I noticed was that they have a very typical nuclear family. I don't know if their house takes any American design cues, but it looks like it does. They just are very American, and it's a plight that's affecting America right now. Pretty.
Yeah, they do make them out to be a likable family. Like, absolutely, I don't find myself really disliking any of the Parks.
Yeah.
I find their situation...
So when they stab him at the end, you don't feel like, yes!
No, but I do, and that's what I'm saying. That's what makes this movie so interesting to me.
Yeah.
And it's very nuanced, is that I did. That's what I was gonna get at. It was like, but at the end, man, it felt so good to watch him die.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about why. Like, why do we feel that way having watched this film? What makes us feel that way?
Being completely honest, like, I looked at those parents and put them in the shoes of my parents.
I think you're supposed
to. Because, I mean, even going so far as to say that they're pretty similar. Like, when it was mentioned that the mom is simple, I would call my mom pretty simple sometimes. Yeah. I think it does a very well job of representing suburban America and how we live so far from cities now that we don't have to deal with a lot of the, so-called riffraff. And I think one of the unique things that this movie achieves is not offending
Yeah.
conservative families that watch it.
Yeah.
Like, they can still digest it, and they won't get, you know,
Angry.
the same message that some of us get, but
Yeah.
they can still watch it and understand what's going on. So I think it does a very good job of, you know, talking about those issues while not, somehow not.
It doesn't demonize people.
Yeah, it doesn't demonize any one group.
Yeah, it doesn't make you feel bad for being rich, even if it's like it could be portrayed that way or understood that way. It's like you say, they're not attacking the rich people.
And it's not like they're just evil people. It's not like, oh, all these evil people who are also rich. It's like, I think every character, I mean, we keep saying this, but every character, every action is taken because of a very clear motivation that you can understand.
Sure. One of the last things I want to touch on is the role of technology in the film. Obviously, at the beginning, they need the Wi-Fi, and like if they don't have the Wi-Fi, then they're not going to get paid, and they're very reliant on technology to survive. And then you also later in the film they have like the nuclear missile button kind of thing, where like just the phone, holds such power over them, and then also the camera being cut. Like if the camera wasn't cut, then they would have gotten in a way bigger trouble, or like Mr. Kim would have been caught. Like I think there's a lot of nuance to the technology, like because some parts feel like the technology is always to push down the poor, but they also like the Kim daughter uses her Photoshop skills to like get to forge the documents, and like even though those weren't totally necessary to get the job because of the whole recommendation thing, like they need that to fight against like the rich people kind of.
Yeah, I think the same thing as before. Like, technology is just a necessity now in the society we've created. Like, you need to have a cell phone. Like, I've heard the argument being made that cell phones are like almost a human right at this point.
Yeah.
Like, obviously that is a huge step compared to where we're at right now in society. But like,
or even internet. I've heard
internet, like internet cafes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a huge thing in the U.S., but there are in every other part of the world. Internet cafes are a huge, necessary thing.
And we see that in the movie.
Yeah, for people to get jobs and everything like that. Like, same like having cars and all that. Like, it becomes a necessity at a certain point. So I think the fact that technology is wielded as a weapon, I think, is indicative of how it kind of is. It's a necessary thing that everybody kind of needs now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small touch, but all of the Kim family uses Androids, and the Park family uses iPhones, including the old housekeeper, which LG is the one phone used by the Kim daughter, and that's a Korean company, and Apple is a very American company, and that's what's used by the Parks.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I noticed when they were in their pseudo basement house, the Kims don't have Wi-Fi at the very beginning of the movie, and then at the very end, when well, not the very end, but when the housekeeper takes the video of them, the dad's like, "Well, it's fine. They won't have internet."
Yes,
down
and
here.
they have cell service in their basement.
In their bomb
shelter.
Yeah.
Phone's working fine.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Also, the poorest of the poor, the man in the basement is the one who uses Morse code to communicate.
Yes.
When the rest of the world is using cell phones.
That is a cool point as well.
Yeah.
I like that as well. Dang. I hadn't noticed.
So the last thing I want to touch on is the relationship between the Kims and what I call the basement dwellers. So they both mentioned opening up these like Taiwanese cake shops, which were
making fun of the dad for that.
Yeah. Which were apparently, that was like a big boom in like 2017 or something in Korea, and like a lot of like poor people were encouraged to like, oh, like start up the shop or
take out a loan.
Yeah, take out a loan because you're gonna make your money back because these are blowing up. And then like it was just like a bubble that like popped, and then everyone like didn't have a job or were a great deal in debt.
Very, very free market.
Yeah. And I also read in an article on Jacobin, which is kind of like a leftist like news outlet sort of, that 25% of South Koreans are self-employed, and it talks about their fried chicken restaurant and how that failed. He also talks about he was like a dairy driver, which apparently is like an Uber driver, basically.
I was wondering kind of like how the gig economy was playing in, because there's not really like, these are all very established jobs, but they're still just getting paid in cash. But
yeah,
it kind of felt like an illusion to, like, none of these felt like a stable, like they kept saying like, oh, there's 500 college graduates coming for this kind of like job for a security guard or something like that. So I think that's kind of what it's going for.
And then obviously the relationship between the two families like really comes to a head when they first discover each other, and when I believe her name is Chung Suk.
Yes.
When they're talking to each other, Chung Suk has this. She believes she's above the old housekeeper, Moon something, and she like the old housekeeper's calling her like sis and stuff, and she's like, "Don't call me sis, don't call me sis." And then as soon as like we talked about stairs, they're on the stairs and they slip down the stairs, and then once they slip down the stairs, they're all on the same level. And then once the housekeeper realizes they're at the same level,
Power
and like
dynamic totally shifted.
Well, and then also another quote that's very telling is like, we're like something about like we're needy, and it's like, I'm not needy. It's like, well we are, and it's like they really were needy. She just wanted to pretend that she had the power or that she was better than her.
Yeah, and as the family tumbles down the stairs, you can tell Chung Suk is no longer.
Yeah, totally loses her power, and
then
then calls her sis, and then she's like, "Don't fucking call me sis, you filthy bitch."
And that strikes so hard.
Yeah.
Cursing is used very sparingly in the film, and like the entire time she comes up to the window, or like to the fancy doorbell like a innocent grandmother. Like, she has blood on her face and she looks disheveled, but she's so kind. Her eyes are always like up and glowing. Like she's always trying to be as polite as possible. And then it's like just sharp change.
Rings the doorbell slowly at first, like, oh, I'll just, let this housekeeper know that I have to go get something downstairs, and progressively presses it faster as she realizes that, this is an intense situation.
I interpreted that as Morse code. That she was trying to communicate to her husband, but like you said, it didn't really sound like Morse code.
That was what I was like. I think we were watching this movie intensely right now.
Yeah. Maybe not. I think you're probably right, because it didn't really sound like Morse code, but I don't know.
I think it really was just to create stress, because at that point is when you are now climax mode. Like that first doorbell, your heart drops, and then it becomes 100 doorbells.
And then when she presses the doorbell, they say that wasn't a part of the plan, and that's when the plan starts to go wrong.
Yeah, because up until that point, everything had gone smoothly.
Yeah. So in conclusion, just want to know, after our discussion, if there was anything, like, what did you take away from the film, and what do you think were, like, some major themes or major just ideas that you feel like the film was really conveying?
So, I think one of the reasons, obviously, like I said before, the reason I like the movie is because of how dense it is. But I think what's also neat about it is how much people can and have been talking about it. It's one of the few movies in a while where I think people have really gone out of their way to watch it and talk about it with one another. I think it has a really universal message that speaks to everyone. Rich, poor, whoever you are, you can get something out of this movie. I think that was one of the reasons why immediately after watching it, one of the first things I did was told my parents about it and already started taking steps to try and get them to watch it, because even though they're very different people from me, I still think they had a lot to learn out of it. And it's just so well shot and well acted, and the dialogue's great. It really is just a movie that everyone can watch and enjoy, while at the same time it discusses stuff that I think right now is more important to talk about than ever.
Yeah, and I think like at the beginning of this we talked about like your first impression, what was striking to you, and going back to that, I was saying like how every character seems very purposeful. Like every action taken in the film is either very clearly motivated, or we later understand why what the motivation was. But I think what I found most striking, even after this discussion now, is I feel like the writing and the direction of the entire movie is not purposefully trying to say one thing. It's trying to bring attention to a bunch of different types of individuals and how they're all interacting. I think like two standards of like really good art in general are, one, people should be able to really see themselves in your art. Like that's the best movies, the best songs are things that people, when they're listening to, they're almost picturing themselves going through the same things as what's happening there, and they feel those emotions. That's how you identify with things. And I think that every character is so fleshed out, even if they're not given much screen time, that you find yourself empathizing and sympathizing with almost every character in the film. And then secondly, like I think really good art like doesn't have one meaning. Like every single person, by living vicariously through certain characters, derives their own meaning. And I think this movie does that so well. And I think that's why people are talking about it so much, is everyone watches that movie and immediately they look at the other person next to them and they're like, oh, so that was cool. I really like the stuff about blah, blah, blah. And people are like, what? I wasn't even paying attention to that.
Yeah.
Like, I was struck by something at the beginning and I was following that the whole time. Like, I've watched this movie now paying attention to just the sound and paying attention to the stairs and everything like that. So I think, in conclusion, just fantastic film, a beautiful open canvas that you can really delve into as deep as you want to. And I think that anyone should have an hour-long discussion like this, because it's made me appreciate it even more.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely my biggest takeaway from our discussion and our analysis of the film is similar to you guys, that like I knew that other people would have different interpretations, and even though maybe we had somewhat similar interpretations, and like that's why I wanted more people on the podcast, just to bounce ideas off each other and see where you were coming from. I love that Dellapenna brought it to his parents and they saw it and they had they still had a similar reaction to it, even though they saw it in a way different way. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from our discussion.
Topics that come up are kind of similar, but everyone gets something out of it. You don't watch this movie passively. You watch this movie very actively.
Your eyes are glued to the screen, both for the dialogue and for the visuals.
Yeah, I enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you so much for joining me, guys.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, listeners.